And welcome back. It is the JFK Assassination Audit video number 65. It is 22 February, and we're going to get back into the Frazier Warren Commission testimony. We're going to call this episode Frazier Follies, and we'll get back into his statement here. All right, so it says, here's Commission Exhibit 347. It is an aerial photograph, and it shows the Texas School Book Depository Building. Here is the depository building here. That is right. Here is the parkway. Right. Here are the overpasses here. Can you show us the map where you think will that map, should be with that map, I guess. Can you, on the map, indicate the general direction from which you thought the sounds came from? Yes, sir, because we were standing right here. Don't mark it up right now. Right. But what I'm trying to say is we were standing down here and back over here. This over here is more or less a knoll. And you can look over there and see this. You can see this furthest left line that curved around here is the one that makes the come out to the Simmons Freeway, and this is the high knoll up here which runs for the tracks. From standing there, it sounded like it came from this general area. So what he's saying with all that BS right there is that he's standing on the front of the school book depository, 6 floors down from where they say the shooter is at. But does he say the shooting's coming from above his head and to the left? No. He says the shooting's coming all the way down by the knoll, the grassy knoll, where everyone else is saying the shooting's coming from. Anyway, that is where it is. Mark a circle. I would say just like over here. Let me make it a little heavier in that general direction. Yes, sir. That was just a part of the knoll. See? The circle mark on number 347 will be identified with an F. The circle mark F represents the general direction of a source of sound as occurred to you as you're still in the front of the sub-school book depository. Is that right? Right. I have no further questions. You see how they cut it off? They end the questions right there. Because that's what you do when you've got an audience who's the American public and they're reading this, they're the jury. You want to cut that off because he's basically telling you what everyone else is telling, that the shots didn't come from the 6th floor depository, which is where they're trying to pin it. Okay? And I just wanted to say something. I've been thinking about this. I mean, really, it's almost laughable that the Warren Commission can go through all this testimony and all this evidence, okay, and come to the conclusion and try to sell you, the jury, on the conclusion that Oswald shot the president from the 6th floor. Because let's just review real quick in case you missed it, in case you were sleeping in class. They're saying that Oswald fired the weapon from the 6th floor and shot the president. Now we got testimony showing that Oswald was on the first floor and the 2nd floor break room getting a Coke, where he was spotted less than 90 seconds after the shooting in the 2nd floor lunchroom with a Coke. That doesn't place him on the 6th floor. He's not on the 6th floor. He's on the 2nd floor 10 minutes before the shooting and a minute and a half after the shooting. So basically it's like this. If you go into a room at 12:15 and you see your son watching TV and he's watching TV and he's drinking a Coke, then you go upstairs and you come back 10 minutes later and he's still sitting in the same position with the cover still on him, with a remote on his lap, drinking a Coke, watching the TV, you can assume that he's been there the whole time. That's a general good assumption. Now, in that 10 minutes, he could have ran outside, ran around the house, ran up to the neighbor, shot the neighbor's dog, ran to the store, robbed a liquor store, and then ran back, and all that 10 minutes possibly, right? Anyway, this is what the Warren Commission is expecting us to believe, okay? And it's real convenient because the Warren Commission presents no other evidence that anyone else can be involved. So therefore, it's implied and impressed upon the jury, you, that only Oswald could have done it. Because, well, who else could have done it? You know? Oswald bought the weapon. It went to his post office box. The weapon was found on the 6th floor. You know, the same supposedly bullet was fired at Edwin Walker, you know. So it's all this superficial implication that Oswald had to have done it because who else could have shot the president? Okay? But regardless of the basic fundamental facts that would matter in a legal case, that Oswald was on the 2nd floor spotted by 3 people, spotted 10 minutes before the assassination and 90 seconds after the assassination. Okay? Oswald would have had to run down the stairs. He was never seen in the stairs by Victoria Adams or the other lady. Oswald's fingerprints were found nowhere on the rifle, including the clip, okay, including the ammunition, which there's no way he could have pushed that bullet clip into the Mannlicher Carcano rifle without leaving his thumbprint unless he was wearing gloves. There's no gloves presented anywhere. Oswald didn't have gunpowder residue on his cheek according to the testing that was done. And matter of fact, this point was so important that Hoover got like 10 of the same exact rifles and had his agents fire 15 to 20 rounds. And they all had gunpowder residue on their cheek. All of them. But here we have Oswald with no gunpowder residue on his cheek. And this is not something you can just wash off by going to the bathroom. So again, it's very, very crucial to understand that they may paint all this other superficial evidence that Oswald did it, but when it comes down to it, Oswald didn't do it. This is why they're avoiding this, because if you've got multiple witnesses saying the shooting came from the grassy knoll, it definitely didn't come from the 6th floor. I personally think there were shots from the 6th floor, but I don't think it was Oswald. Okay? And if you think about it, the 6th floor shooting, which got everybody's heads turning back and around, would have given the witnesses, well, would have given the shooters plenty of opportunity to shoot from the grassy knoll without being seen. All right, with the silencer, something. Anyway, so we've gotten that part. Let's go to the next testimony. All right. This is a continuation the next day. Here's Mr. Liebler again. This is Mr. Liebler, who's really famous with the Warren Commission at avoiding evidence and just narrowing it down and wearing down witnesses. Okay, it says, Mr. Frazier, I believe you've already appeared before the commission itself and given testimony of your knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald and his activities. Is that right? Yes, sir. Will you please stand and take the oath? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You notice how the attorneys never give the oath to themselves. You notice that? Because they would be lying. And of course this is not, they're trying to make it look like it's an established court, but it's not a court. This is just some kind of commission, committee, has no legal bearing whatsoever. All right, I do. I want to ask you 2 or 3 questions that are not asked when you appear before the commission. Your name is Buell Wesley Frazier, right? You're the same Buell Wesley Frazier, as I understand, who has previously testified before the commission about Lee Harvey Oswald and about the Oswald road back and forth with you from Irving to Dallas. Is that right? Yes, sir. I think he came with you to work on November 22nd, 1963, right? You testified in Washington that particular morning you saw Oswald carrying a large brown package from the car into the school book depository, and then you also saw the package in the car. Isn't that right? You see how they insert the words large brown package? And it wasn't a large brown package. It was only 2 feet long. That's really less than the length of an average man's arm. And you described the package, and you told us about what you saw in detail at that time. Yes, sir. Did you ever see Oswald with a package similar to the one you saw on November 22nd, 1963? No, sir. Did you ever see Oswald carry a package from Irving into Texas School Book Depository that looked anything like the package he had on November 22nd, 1963? No, sir. Did you ever see him with a package that looked like the package any other time at any other place? No, sir. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much for coming in. All right, thank you. See, that's all they did. They're just bringing him in just to emphasize that Oswald had a big brown paper package and that he never had one before except on the 22nd of November. Very interesting. All right, that's it on that testimony. We'll go to the next one. All right, now this is the Clay Shaw trial, 13 February 1969, and this is Wesley Frazier's testimony. What is your first name? Buell. Now, Mr. Alcock was working for the district attorney's office, so Garrison's office there. Mr. Frazier, where do you reside? I live in Irving, Texas. Where is that in relation to Dallas, Texas? It's a suburb of Dallas. How long have you resided in Irving, Texas? I first went to live there in 1963. When was it that you moved to Irving, Texas? What month, if you recall? Would you repeat the question? What month did you first move to Irving, Texas in 1963? Now, by the time we get to this point, okay, so like I think a little bit more than a year, according to his autobiography, later, Wesley Frazier ended up in the military. I believe he was a cook or truck driver or something like that. He ended up going to Germany and then ended up also in Vietnam. And I think he said he wanted to go in the Air Force to learn to fly planes, but he got his draft notice before he signed up to join the Air Force, and so therefore they could put him wherever they wanted to. But anyway, there you go. So it says, what month did you first move to Irving, Texas? It was around the first part of September. With whom were you staying at the time in Irving? I was staying with my sister. What is her name? Lynn Randall. Were you employed at that time? When I first came to Irving, I was not. Were you subsequently employed? When I came to live there, I came for a reason. I came to look for a job, and I did find one. Where did you go to work? I went to work for the Texas School Books. Where is that located? In Dallas. Can you tell us the location of it? It is located at Elm Street. The address is 411, I believe. It is the intersection of Elm and Houston. What were your duties at the Texas School Book Depository? Hold on one second. I just thought of something. With the Warren Commission testimony, you notice how they didn't ask Wesley Frazier if he saw Oswald after the shooting. I think they did, but no, I think he did. And he said no. No. They asked him, actually, when he came to work, was that the last time that he saw Oswald? And he said yes. So they didn't ask him later on, after the shooting, did you see Oswald? They asked him when he came in and Oswald walked ahead of him, did you see Oswald any other time after that? He said, no, except on the 6th floor when we were working. But after 11, they all went to lunch. He didn't see him. But Wesley Frazier says in his 6th floor museum testimony or questioning that he actually saw Oswald after the shooting when he was standing around outside. Okay, because let's recall what Wesley Frazier said he did. That after the shooting, he stood there. A lady came up and said the president's been shot. He stood there for a while. Some other guys went down by the railroad tracks. He stepped off the steps, went down a little ways down Elm towards the railroad tracks, came back, went inside for a little bit, stood around, went back outside, went to the corner of Houston and Elm where he said he saw Oswald come around the back dock, the warehouse dock, the back of the building, come up Houston, cross Elm, and go up Elm, going away. He figured he was going for lunch. And then Wesley Frazier said he went back inside, got his lunch, went downstairs, and finished his lunch until they were told to go home at 3 o'clock. Anyway, but they don't make that clear, and they don't get into that in his testimony, which I find odd. Because don't you think that he would have told the commission, yeah, I saw Oswald come off the back of the dock, get onto Houston, and go up Elm? And then the next question would have been, well, what time was that? About how long after the shooting was that? No one ever makes that clear. Anyway, where were your duties at the Texas School Book Depository? I was an order filler. Generally, what would that consist of? I would generally consist of filling the invoices that came from upstairs in the offices. They send them down, and the order fillers take the invoices. You have listed on there which are books, and you go to different floors on which they are stored, and you would fill the order. Now, in his other testimony, he said that most of the orders are filled on the first floor. Occasionally, because they have these bins of books. But when those bins of books are empty, that's when they have to go to the other floors. All right. And do you know, did you know at the time a woman named Ruth Payne? When I was working at the Texas School Books, yes. Well, I heard her name, but as far as really knowing her like a close friend, no, I did not. Did you know where she lived? Yes, I did. Where was that in relation to your residence? She lived up the block, about half a block up the street. In the month of October 1963, did you have occasion to meet a man by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald? Would you repeat the question again, please? In the month of October 1963, did you have an occasion to meet the man by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald? Yes, sir, I did. Where did you meet him? I first met him at Lee at Texas School Books. You call him Lee? Yes. Was he working there at the time? The first time I saw him was when he first came to work there. Can you approximate the date for us? It was sometime in the middle of October, I believe. That was in 1963, is that correct? Right. Mr. Frazier, I'm going to go show you a picture which I previously marked for purposes of identification as States Exhibit 1 and ask you to view this photograph. As a result of having viewed it, do you recognize the individual pictured in that photograph? Yes, I do. Who is that? Lee Harvey Oswald. Is this the man you work with at the Texas School Book Depository? Yes, sir, it is. Did you, Mr. Frazier, commute to work daily from Irving to Dallas? Yes, sir, I did. Did you know where Lee Harvey Oswald lived when he first went to work at the depository? No, sir, I did not. Did you subsequently find out? Through generally talking to him, I found out he had an apartment over in Oak Cliff. Did he ever have occasion to drive to Irving, Texas with you? Would you repeat that again? Did Lee Harvey Oswald ever drive to Irving, Texas with you? He rode with me on Friday afternoon because he went to see his wife, who at the time was staying with Mrs. Payne's, and he would ride back and forth with me on a Monday morning. Is this the same Mrs. Payne who lived up the street from where you were staying at the time? Yes, sir. What sort of work did Oswald do at the depository, if you know? He did the same type of work I did. He filled orders. What sort of clothing would he wear in doing this kind of work? Well, the type of clothes fellows wore were they just old working clothes, just blue jeans and shirt that you wouldn't mind getting dirty, or if it got tore or something like that, you wouldn't be out of a great deal of money on it. It was just an average shirt. Approximately, Mr. Frazier, how many times, if you recall, did Lee Harvey Oswald ride home with you on Friday night from Dallas, Texas to Irving, Texas? Can you approximate for us? He went home nearly every Friday on the weekend, except one weekend prior to the assassination. He went home nearly every Friday for the weekend, except the one weekend prior to the assassination. Do you know the reason why he didn't go with you on that occasion? Yes, I asked him, and he said that he was working on his driver's license, and he was going to take a driving test. Now, we're going to find out from Mrs. Payne about that date, so don't you think it's odd that if you're going to kill the President of the United States, you're either going to end up in jail or you're going to flee to another country, say back to Russia. So what would be the point of getting a driver's license? And we have this testimony from Ruth Payne and from Wesley Frazier that the weekend before the assassination, Oswald went to test to get his driver's license, but according to Mrs. Payne, when they went, the testing facility was closed. So don't you think it's odd that you would waste your time going to get a driver's license when you're actually going to assassinate the president the very next week and either end up in prison or end up in another country like the Soviet Union? Anyway, that's just blown over, but you have to think about why people do things. And if you're determined to kill the president and you're planning to kill the president, you're not going to waste your time doing things like going to take a driving test. The reason that he goes to take the driving test the weekend before, the Friday before the assassination of the president, is that he doesn't know he's going to be framed for trying to assassinate the president. That's why. Did you see him at all that weekend? That would be the weekend preceding the assassination. Did you see Lee Harvey Oswald at all that weekend? Would you repeat that again? Did you see Lee Harvey Oswald the weekend preceding the assassination of the president? That would be the weekend he didn't go to Irving, Texas. No, sir, I did not. Were you ever in Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment in Oak Cliff, Dallas? No, sir. Mr. Frazier, these trips to the schoolbook depository in Dallas, Texas, and Irving, did you ever engage Oswald in such a conversation? So here's another problem I have with this testimony, is because if Ruth Payne had driven Oswald to get his driving test on Friday, that means he would be staying with them over the weekends. That means Monday he would need a ride back with Wesley Frazier, but there's no memory or mention of Wesley Frazier driving him back that Monday. Anyway, were you ever in Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment in Oak Cliff, Dallas? No, sir. Mr. Frazier, these trips from the book depository in Dallas to Irving, did you engage Oswald in such conversations? No, sir, I did not. Is there any reason why you did not? Well, he was not talkative type. Some people are not. I don't believe if someone doesn't want to talk to you, you can force them to talk. What do you mean not talkative type? For example, some people are more friendly than others. They will talk to anybody they see. They always seem to have something to talk about. He was just the opposite. He didn't have a friendly approach to people. He did not talk generally to most anybody. So again, let's frame that. So you've got Oswald, who's this partying person, almost like a rock star in Russia. Everybody knows him. He knows everybody. He's going out with a bunch of different girls. But then you've got this Oswald in Dallas, Texas, who he doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't answer very many questions, and just sticks to himself. It's almost like it's a different Oswald. Or it could be that maybe Oswald is on an assignment and keeping his eyes open and following orders, what he's been told to do, and not talking too much about himself. A lot of times, people, if they know they're not going to be at a place very long, won't open up with other people and get to know other people, or let them get to know him, because he's going to figure, well, it's not going to be worth it because I'm not going to be here very long. That could be what he's thinking. Anyway, all right. Okay, so we're going to stop there, go into the video portion, and we'll keep going.
I did not show it because it's like insulting a beggar. So if sometimes Lee annoyed me, I didn't show it to him. Well, this week, from then on, I think we should start now on, if we have time, on the element, on a chapter F, the increasing, which I called increasing animosity. The increasing animosity which existed between Lee and Marina Oswald, and I think we showed it in the previous chapter, how it slowly developed. Looking back and remembering Lee's relation to other people, I must admit that he was rather standoffish, spoke civilly only to people who happened to be of interest to him and whom he liked, and these were not many. He mentioned very rarely his mother, never criticized her, but neither had he any kind word for her. Neither did Marina. We have never met Lee's mother, but we admire her efforts, as awkward as they may be in trying to clear up the name of her son. We wish her the best of luck in these endeavors. Following. Lee was not only favorably disposed towards President Kennedy, but he admired him in his own quiet and reserved way. One evening we discussed Kennedy's efforts on bringing peace to the world, and he said that he thought it was great. Kennedy's effort to bring end to segregation brought expressions of admiration from Lee. Lee, by the way, had a bug on the subject of integration. He told me that he was willing to fight for it and to die for it.
There you go.
Lee obviously identified himself, in his frustrated, miserable childhood, with the fate of underdog, of colored children, and he expressed his feelings to everybody who wanted to hear it. He despised reactionary people, the so-called hate groups, the white supremacists from the Deep South, and there I was ready to agree with him. Marina, of course, was only interested in getting along in this world, acquire some possessions for the...
So again, let's think about that. Since Oswald is dead, all we know about Oswald is from what other people that knew him say. And the Mornshield seems to have been the closest person that was alive at the time that could say about Oswald. So if you think about it, JFK and Robert Kennedy were fighting against segregation. Okay? Matter of fact, if we remember, in August 1963 is when Martin Luther King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington, D.C. that Ruth Paine actually went and attended. And then as she was visiting relatives on the way back, stopped in Louisiana and picked up Marina Oswald and brought her back to Dallas. So think about that. You've got the champion of civil rights, the champion of the liberal side, okay, the champion of what do you call it? Normalization of relations with Cuba and Russia in John F. Kennedy, who's fighting the mafia, who's fighting the racists, okay, who's fighting the right-wing extremists like General Walker. And if Oswald is an anti-fascist, as he says, and he signed that picture to the Morn Shield, and he supposedly took a shot at Walker, who was fired by Kennedy and put in a hospital by Kennedy, how does it make sense that this anti-fascist, liberal, anti-integrationist Oswald would then turn around and shoot the same person that he admires and is on his side? It doesn't make any sense. You know? It's very, very strange. And how they can say that, oh, you know, because he's a Marxist-Leninist, that's why he shot Kennedy? I mean, the right wing and the conservatives in Texas especially were the ones that were accusing Kennedy of being communist and pro-communist. So why would Oswald shoot Kennedy, who's on closer to his side, okay, after he tried to shoot Walker? Now, Walker I can understand, but I have serious doubts that he even shot Walker. But now they're trying to accuse him of killing Kennedy? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, keep going.
For the rest, she did not give a damn. So there was a deep gap between ideology and prosaic materialism, and this leads to their increasing animosity. Lee was indifferent also for his brother Robert, and spoke of him only at one or two occasions. But neither Marina expressed any fondness for his brother-in-law. As I understand, Lee and Marina had stayed with Robert Oswald and his wife upon their arrival from Russia, and probably they had usual domestic clashes during this forced cohabitation. To my wife, it was clear why it was difficult to tolerate Marina in one's house for any length of time. She liked to stay in bed till noon or later, preferably abhorred domestic chores, and furthermore, there must have been a complete language barrier.
You know that because you know the long sleeping, because she also stayed in your house. No?
Yes, she stayed in our house, and we recall this incident.
Sorry.
Same thing.
Of course, I went over that. I'm not trying to make excuses for Marina, but if you think about it, if she's under a lot of stress being away from her husband and stuff like that, maybe she's depressed. Maybe she's sleeping in because she's depressed. But also, it could be that since she doesn't know anybody, and let's not forget, at that time with the De Mornshields, where she's staying with the De Mornshields, she's staying by herself at Neely and the other address in Oak Cliff, not with the Paynes, okay? So she's staying with herself with the baby while her husband is off working 8, 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day in a foreign country. She doesn't know anybody. If she goes out, she can't communicate. She can't go to the store because she doesn't know anybody. She doesn't know any English. So her only real time is to be up when her husband's home, which would be in the evening. So she would probably sleep until noon, get up, wash the dishes, wash the clothes, do some domestic things with the baby, and then the husband came home, and then she's up till midnight with the husband. So I can understand. I mean, believe me, I've lived in other countries, and it's not exactly the same as living in the U.S. Everybody's very regimented in the U.S. You get up in the morning, take a shower, commute to work 8 hours, commute back home, eat dinner, watch a TV show, go to sleep. It's very, very regimented. But when you get to other countries, that routine's broken, you see. So whatever her routine was in Russia, okay, it's probably a little different in the U.S. And difficult for her. I mean, she's homesick probably. All right.
Was the same opinion my own daughter had of Marina and her lack of cooperation in the domestic chores, and the fact that she slept very late. Lee was not the average, eager, go-getting type of a person, like his brother Robert.
Excuse me, George, at that point.
Mhm.
Can I ask Jeanne a question?
Yes.
Jeanne, when she slept late, didn't you say something about that she then let the children also wait until she woke up? That she that she wasn't looking after the children, wasn't that?
Well, she had one child at that time, and whenever she slept late, the child just slept with her. It was amazing. And for a little baby, usually they cry at 6 o'clock, and mother gets up, gives them a bottle. But that child, amazingly, just slept right there with her. And whenever she gets up, then she feeds the child. But child also very often was kept up very late. So maybe that was the reason that the child could sleep longer in the morning.
Lee was not the average, eager, go-getting type of a person, like his brother Robert, and he did not admire such people. I often thought it was a pity Lee did not have a better education. He might have done well in the scholastic world, and would have made a useful citizen. But fate was not to be kind to him. His relations with Marina worsened every day now, and Marina began to ask my wife for a permission to spend a night with us, or some time with her without Lee, with us without Lee. She confided in her unhappiness of having been abused physically. She, by the way, when she stayed with us, wore my wife's silk nightgowns and sometimes spent the night on the sofa in our living room. She also took the baby to my daughter's apartment in Fairmount. In the meantime, while all this was going on, Lee kept on working overtime, reading his Russian books, maybe sulking, but always proud, always meticulously honest, paying his bills and living like a hermit.
Do you get to what kind of books he was reading and all that?
Yeah, I think I should mention that whenever I saw Lee reading, he read Russian classics, which are difficult for a fellow who was not born in Russia to read. He read Turgenev, Pushkin, Dostoevsky, Gogol, Lermontov, liked Russian poetry, and took out of the library exclusively good classical books.
Did you say he also listened, for instance, to Tchaikovsky's Queen of Spades? That he?
I think so. I think he had his favorite. That was his favorite.
So he did listen to classical music.
Yes, yes, he liked classical music, and he liked Russian folk music too. They had a lot of Russian records.
One moment, George.
To remember back, the point of their disagreements and more quarrels and fights started that Marina was corresponding with her ex-boyfriend in Russia, and Lee intercepted that letter. And from then on, the fights became quite bitter.
Oh, she did have a...
She had, yes, before. And she started to correspond with that young man. I assume it was young man. And and then she almost was going to go. she almost was planning to go back to Russia, and that, at any rate, that's what Lee thought, that she maybe wants to go back to Russia to this boyfriend.
He was afraid
And
of it.
yes, and from then on they start more and more quarrels, and then his objections to her smoking. She was a real chain smoker, constant cigarette after cigarette, and objecting to her drinking wine. I never saw her drinking anything else but wine, but he was such an ascot himself. He objected to that, and of course the more he objected, the more she did both things. So from then on their life became worse and worse, and
Struggle.
more quarrelsome.
Well,
Yes. And also about the baby, he was adored the child to such an extent that if a child make one little sound, and if Marina is not right there in this instant, he was already furious with Marina.
yeah.
And Marina took care of her sufficiently well, but to him nothing was good enough. That child was something like out of
Would you
this
say
world.
he was
to
a
him.
perfectionist?
Absolute perfectionism. That child, it was his idol.
Mhm.
Absolute idol. And just expression on his face when he looked at that baby, it was unbelievable. For such a young man and having so many other interests in life, it was unbelievable. He was excellent father. In fact, he was too good because he sponsors to spoil the
He
child.
cuddled it too much. He
Cuddled
smothered
too
it.
much, yes. And it was hard on Marina too, because she was with the baby all day long,
Mhm.
and he saw the baby just for a short little
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And so there you go. There's another one. So if he's just absolutely adores and loves his baby so much, okay, he's getting on to Marina for not taking care of the baby the way he thinks the baby should be taken care of. Usually people that care about other people like that, and especially children, are not going to go out and throw their life away and throw the child's life away, okay, by trying to assassinate the President of the United States. Think about it. How many terrorists do you know, suicide terrorists, that go out and kill other people and have a lot of family? They usually don't. They're usually younger people with no attachments. A lot of these terrorists, like Hamas, gets a lot of these people that have been, you know, their father or their mother or the family has been shamed, and so therefore they become terrorists to elevate or regain some kind of status for their family. Okay? So Oswald has every reason to live and not go on a suicide mission and try to kill the President of the United States, which is going to get caught and going to get thrown in jail or prison or whatever, or worse yet, killed like he was. So think about it. You're trying to get back together with your wife. You absolutely adore your child. You love being with the children so much that you go over there every weekend to see them. Okay? But yet you're going to plan and kill the President of the United States, who you actually like and is on your side. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. All these things that they're saying make the Warren Commission's painting of Oswald total bullshit. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
So it was two different things, but that also added a lot to their quarrels. His complaint that
And
she
these
was not
quarrels
adequate
took
mother.
often place in your presence and George's presence.
They quarreled in front of us. They never fought in front of us, but they quarreled quite bitterly. And then, of course, probably continue quarreling home. And the next day we saw Marina with black eye, or with some bruises on her.
That actually happened.
It actually happened. He really did it. And we scolded him. We talked to him. We tried to explain to him, for God's sakes, you live in a civilized country. You're not back in the wilderness of Russia or something. And maybe they beat their wives, but it's not done in this country. And I said,
You realize the Prime Minister of Japan recently was exposed to beating up his wife, so...
No kidding.
Okay, and then we return to the story. Thank you very much, because this is an excellent interjection.
With all this,
Yeah.
I know that my wife liked Marina and found her entertaining and tried to help her in any way. And yet we had to listen to her constant complaints about that idiot, Lee, who brutalizes me and does not give me enough sex. Again, we advised Marina to study English, to go back to school, to revalidate her degree, to become independent of Lee. It was unfair to both of them to continue that way, said Jean. My wife gave her the English records she had used herself to study English here.
In what year did you use them, Jean?
20 years back.
20 years back.
British record.
She
It's
had had
a set of records to learn English from Russian.
From Russian to English, yeah. Excellent record.
She had had herself a hard time when she came to this country. She learned, she worked, became successful and independent. We gave Marina our own phonograph, but instead she played melancholy Russian records and did not study anything. It was highly amusing for us, considering the sad situation, that one evening Lee and Marina showed us a letter from one of Marina's friends in USSR, and Lee read it to us with his wife's permission. This letter said, "Marina, I knew you would do it. I knew well from the first time I met you that you were destined for something great.
There
And
you go.
now in America you are such a success." Ironical, isn't it, that Marina finally did become a notorious and successful woman after Lee's death.
You see, so combined with what we have from Ragab, the Moroccan student, and how Oswald or Marina met Oswald at that trade hall dance, and how, most likely these girls that went to the trade hall dances were informants for the KGB. This is what I think happened, is that Marina is a go-getter, wanted a better life outside of Russia, volunteered for this program to meet these foreigners and hopefully turn one of them. And it's also interesting that Marina met two of the defectors that were Americans. So it tells you that she was working an assignment, okay? And then Ragab, this Moroccan student that said he met Marina in Moscow, I think he met a different Marina, but what he was saying is that this Marina, it seemed like, was using him to find out information about what he was doing and things like that. So he felt that she was probably working for somebody as an informant. But this is what I think happened, is that they have this informant program the KGB is running. We'll call it the Marina Project, okay? They're sending out these young, beautiful girls, working as informants for the KGB, either being paid or being hooked. They're reporting back on these tourists, defectors, news people that they're meeting at these parties and wherever. Marina found out about this through her father, or her uncle, I believe, this colonel in the GRU. And she decided to use this program to get out of Russia. And that's what she did. She latched on to Oswald, got married and pregnant almost immediately, and then started pushing on Oswald to go back to the United States, and used him as a vehicle to get back to the U.S., but she had to stay with him until her visa, I think it's like 2-3 years, cleared before she could, get a divorce of some kind. And she was manipulating Oswald, and then also promising to write back to Aunt KGB. She was probably writing them back, but it tells you that she didn't want to study English. That tells you she's not a trained KGB agent. Okay? That she wants the good life but didn't want to work for it. And that's what happened. Oswald got killed. She immediately remarried another man and lived the good life in Dallas, Texas. And she also got a lot of money from people donating to her because they felt sorry for her because her husband was killed. She had 2 children. All right, so we're going to stop here and go into the next section. So I'm constantly searching Google under different terms, and I came across this really interesting little file here. And we'll read this stuff later when we get back to who was Oswald and the timeline leading up to the assassination. But I did want to get to this portion right. Let's see. Right there. Okay, so this is Oswald's payroll. Okay, and this is when he was working at Jaeger Childs. As you can see, here's the check number, the date of the check, the date that it was stamped or cashed, and the amount. All right, we'll back it up. All right, so he started working the beginning of October after he got fired from the Leslie, whatever, the welding. He went to work in October, almost right around the same time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, in this defense contractor, Jaeger Childs. And it says here that he was living over in Fort Worth, but then moved to 602 Elsbeth Street. And there's his P.O. box right there. All right, so let's take a look at this income right here. You see, this is his weekly check. He's making, on average, $60, $50, like that. You see? Right there. So, let's see, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. He's got about 6 months of income. Let's not forget that he had over $500 that was due to the State Department on that loan to get him back, plus $200 that he owed his brother. That's $700 divided by 26 paychecks. You're looking at about $27 a paycheck. All right, so write that down, $27 a paycheck. And then what we're going to do is we're going to average his paychecks here. So he's got, what, 41, 21, 49, 61, 49, 41, 62, 11, 67, 47, 69, 53, 67, 19, 71, 58, 65, 33, 56, 94, 49, 28. I would think that the average was about $55, and that this extra is when he worked like overtime. 54, 78, 69, 14, 56, 10, 72, 34, 59, 14, 54, 78, 70, 69, 57, 98, 56, 91, 67, 59, 70.69, 74.38, and 34.48. All right. So that's 1,515. Now hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. So the average check is 5827. Okay? So if we take the 700, which is 500 for the State Department loan, 200 for the loan from his brother Robert, okay? That's $700 divided by 26 paychecks. Even if he was paying more, even if he started paying some with the Leslie welding company, he was only there, July, August, September, about 3 months. Okay? So that's about, let's see, hold on one second. 700 divided by 26 is 2692. So if you take 2692 and divide it by his average paycheck of 5827, he's spending over 46% of his income paying back his brother and paying back the State Department. That's almost impossible or ridiculous. So what that leaves him with, okay, you got 5827 minus 2692. He's got $31, okay, a week. That gives him about $135 only a month left over. I mean, think about it. Say your rent is $50 or $60. You've got no money left. So why, like DeMornshall says, why was he so studious in paying back the government? Okay? Anybody would have understood. He could have gone to them and said, hey, I can only afford, $10 a week, $5 a week, $25, $30 a paycheck or a month to pay you guys, because I'm only bringing in, let's see, 58, 27. He's only bringing in $252 a month. Anybody could look at this and see reasonably the most he most likely could pay is $25, $30 a month. But yet he's paying $26.92. He's paying over $116 a month. That doesn't make any sense. That's a good reason for the wife to fight with him. I mean, she may be Russian, but she understands that, hey, you're working all this extra time, but we don't have any money? And again, you got to ask yourself, why would he want to pay the government back if he's this anti-government, revolutionary Marxist? Most people that are anti-government, anti-establishment aren't well known for paying back their bills, paying back their loans, especially to the government, what they owe. They try to stretch that out as long as they can and pay back the least amount possible. Especially you got 2 children and a wife. You got 3 dependents. So it doesn't make much sense to pay that like he did. So why would Oswald be so studious, this anti-establishment, anti-government, Marxist-Leninist, be so patriotic to pay back his loans? Well, there's 2 reasons. One, you can't get a passport until you pay back that loan. Now, if he just got to the U.S., why would he want to leave? Another reason also is they've got you. They can garnish your wages. They can go in and basically manipulate you. They've got a hook. The FBI can see this and say, hey, you're working for us now. Until you pay back that loan, you belong to us. You're on the hook. So we want you to do this, do that, and then we'll give you a little bit of informant money to pay that back. another thing you got to figure also is that if Oswald's working as an informant for the FBI or the O&I, whatever, they're paying him $10, $15, $20 a week, and he's using that money to pay back the State Department. Anyway, so we'll go over Oswald's finances later. It is interesting that I think that if Oswald did it and he was just a crazy nut and there was no conspiracy and there's no connections between him and anyone else, and it was just Oswald, and like I said, he's just a nut, why would Oswald's tax returns be top secret for 60 years, over 60 years, and not be released to the public? He's just a nut, right? A loner. There was no conspiracy, right? So why would Oswald's tax returns be top secret for over 60 years? Doesn't make much sense. Anyway, we'll keep going. Got about 15 minutes here. All right, so I'm going to get back into definitions here. So I mentioned this before, but I'm going to go over it again, because this is central to everything that happens in the JFK assassination. Fear. And let's read the definition of that. Fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. He is prey to irrational fears. Or it could be a verb. Is to be afraid of someone or something as likely to be dangerous, painful, or threatening. Farmers fear they will lose business. All right. So we can look at that word and let's apply it to the different characters involved in the assassination. So what would cause career intelligence men, career military men, career government agents, FBI, CIA, and Secret Service men to turn on Kennedy in either participate in him being assassinated, go along with him being assassinated, or look the other way and cover up his assassination? And I say fear. Fear is the number one motivation for human survival. It outdoes everything else. Logic, love, everything is fear. Fear-based. This is why you see politics today. It's all fear-based. Look how the Republicans are staying in office and getting elected. It's all fear-based. Has nothing to do with logic. Has nothing to do with reality. It's all emotionally fear-based. You know, the Mexicans are crossing the border and they're going to take us over. They're bringing drugs and prostitution, and they're coming for your children in the schools. Okay, they're going to bring drugs to your children in the schools. It's funny how, when these right-wing people go in with AR-15s and gun down all the children, that somehow they're not able to fear-base that one in order to get rid of the assault weapons that are doing majority of the killing. But anyway, a lot of politics is fear-based nowadays. That's how people stay in power. What's happening in Russia is fear-based. Putin's able to stay in control and in power because, hey, if I'm not here, if you don't have my strong hand holding off the forces that are trying to destroy Russia, I'm the only thing between you and the enemy, or I'm the only thing between the enemy getting to you and destroying Russia and killing you and coming after your children. Okay? That's fear-based. So when you look at the Kennedy assassination, you see these people that already had hate for Kennedy and his politics, like the Southern racists, the Nazis, the Cubans, the anti-Castro Cubans, the old people, some people in the CIA. But what happened after the Cuban Missile Crisis and how it was resolved, okay, where the military tried to use fear that, hey, if we don't take out Castro and take out the Cubans, they're going to lie, they're going to keep their missiles there, and they're going to attack us. They're within, minutes launching and attacking Washington, D.C. from Cuba. So we've got to go in and invade, send in the Marines, and wipe them out before they wipe us out. Take out Castro now, and that'll solve the situation. Okay? When Kennedy didn't go along with that, because he knew that they had invaded Cuba, the Cubans would have used nuclear missiles or nuclear tactical weapons on the beaches and wiped out the Marines. And then we would have no choice but retaliate with nuclear weapons. They would have retaliated with nuclear weapons on us. The Russians would have got involved. So there's all that fear there. And that's what I believe changed the majority of people inside the establishment. Like I said, there's plenty of people who didn't like Kennedy in the FBI, the CIA, the military, but none of them would have ever gone along with killing the President of the United States or looking the other way or covering it up until the Cuban Missile Crisis. And when they, in their mind, that all the fearful things that the crazies have been saying came true. Kennedy pulled the chicken switch, and now he's going to get us out of Vietnam. So, Oliver Stone likes to stick to the thing about going into Vietnam or getting out of Vietnam was the main reason for killing Kennedy. I disagree. I think it's a combination of things, but one of the main things, I believe, is not going into Cuba. They tried to get him in to go into Cuba and the Bay of Pigs. They tried to trick him there. They tried to get him, Curtis LeMay tried to get him to go into Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay? And Kennedy didn't do it. They established the blockade until the Russians agreed to remove the missiles. And they had an agreement with Khrushchev. And then that secret agreement with Khrushchev put even more fear in the military establishment that maybe Kennedy is soft on communism. Maybe he's even a secret communist and making secret deals with the communists and is going to hand over the government to these communists. And you see this fear manifesting itself in the form of movies. Okay? You got The Manchurian Candidate that comes out right before the Kennedy assassination. You've got this other movie, 7 Days in May, about a military coup against the president. Okay? You've got this other one, comes out right around the same time, Dr. Strangelove. And all those things, anything that's reflected in Hollywood is just a reflection of what writers are picking up from the general population in the news media, and they're putting it down in print and expressing that through the screen. So, fear is an awesome motivator. It will get the most liberal, anti-fascist people in the world to go along with the plan to cover up the president's murder out of fear. This is what Johnson did because he knew the crazies. He was part of the crazies, and he used that fear of nuclear war that he knew they were trying to push back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he used that to push on to Warren to say, look, okay, we know the Cubans and the Russians were involved in the assassination. He lied to Warren. He switched it. There were Cubans involved, but they were anti-Castro Cubans. But he switched it to, we know the Cubans and the Russians were involved in the assassination of the president. Oswald lived in Russia. He tried to get into Cuba. And if we don't isolate it down to just Oswald, if it comes out that the Cubans and Russians were involved and that Oswald was part of that the American public will be so outraged, they will force me and play my hand to have to invade Cuba to take out Castro, and then that would launch a nuclear war which will kill a couple of billion people, half the population of the world. And we don't want that to happen. So what we have to do is isolate it down to just and only Oswald, and no one else. Don't open up any more doors. Because the fate of the world, Mr. Warren, depends on you. The blood of billions of people is in your hands now. And out of fear, because Warren was a liberal Republican, like I said, we've got Brown versus Board of Education, which basically ended segregation. We've got the Miranda rights. You have the rights of an individual arrested and accused of a crime by the state. Those Miranda rights came out during the war while Judge Warren was the Chief Justice. We also, the very next year or within 2 years after the assassination, Warren came out with the rules of evidence, which basically standardized across the country sets of rules that people in the courts and the justice system went by to establish justice for the individual and for society. Okay? So fear caused this liberal to run into the arms of the assassination conspiracy and to assist them. Not that he was part of the assassination from the beginning, but the way the conversation was focused to him, if you don't, close it on the foots of just Oswald, no one else, we could have a world war and kill over half the population of the world. And the blood of those people would be on your hands. That's pretty damn big motivation, to go along with the conspiracy. But see, he doesn't know there's a conspiracy. He thinks it's the Russians and the Cubans. This is what he's been told by the president. Fear is motivation. Fear will cause people to do the craziest fucking things. Like I said, we're going to get into this back into this the next video, but I wanted to end with this. Executive Order 9066. Executive Order 9066 was the United States presidential executive order signed and issued during World War II by the United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt on 19 February 1942. It says this order authorized the forced removal of all persons deemed a threat to national security from the West Coast to relocation further inland, resulting in the incarceration of Japanese Americans. 2/3 of them were U.S. citizens born and raised in the United States. So here we have this liberal, ultra-liberal, some maybe even accuse him of being a communist president. Okay? I mean, General Walker, who Oswald supposedly took a shot at, was going around saying that Eleanor Roosevelt was a communist in her college years. Okay? And that she had the ear of the president. And that she was helping him get closer to communism. But here, we have a very liberal president writing an executive order. It's not a law. It didn't go through both houses of Congress, get passed and get signed by the president. It didn't work its way through the courts. It was just an executive order. The president says, this is what we're going to do because of fear. This all started because after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, one plane crash landed on a small island called Niue, which is just west of Oahu and Maui, or Oahu and Kauai. There's another island there. Okay, it's a small island. The Japanese plane crashed. The pilot survived. There were a couple of Japanese workers there, and he asked them for help. They helped him, and they actually helped him fight off when the military came to check out why the plane crashed and to arrest him. They actually participated in the fight with the Japanese man, the Japanese pilot, because he was Japanese and they were Japanese. So because of that one incident, of fear, because the majority of the population of Hawaii was Japanese, of Japanese descent, okay? And it was the Japanese that attacked us on Pearl Harbor. Because of that one incident of fear, President Roosevelt was convinced into writing this executive order 9066, which basically forcibly removed Japanese Americans born in America of Japanese descent, removed them from their homes, placed them in internment camps, which are basically concentration camps. They're barbed wired. They couldn't leave. They had no freedom of movement. They couldn't vote. They couldn't work. They couldn't take care of their families. Their homes were confiscated, never given back to them. They were sold off. The money went to the city or the county or the government. Their businesses were confiscated. All their product, their money, their bank accounts confiscated, never given back to them, never compensated for that loss. I mean, these are essential elements of the Constitution. You can't just take someone's property without due process of law, and them being convicted of a crime, and then that property was used in the committing of the crime. Because people can be murderers all damn day, but the government still can't take their property and sell off their house and sell off their business. Even if they're convicted of murder, their property is still theirs unless that property was used in the commission of the crime. Maybe they're growing drugs and then killed somebody in the process of that. But, even murderers today don't have their property seized and sold off by the government, or their businesses seized and sold off by the government. Even murderers today don't have their wife and their children sent to prison with them. Even if they're convicted of a crime, a murderer is convicted of a crime, his wife and his uncle and his cousins and his brother and his children aren't sent off to prison with him. But in this case, there's no crime committed. Nobody's got due process of law. Nobody's been before a court. Nobody had a lawyer. Nobody was able to present evidence for their defense in front of a jury, and no jury convicted them. But because of fear, all that due process that we hold dear in the Constitution was completely thrown out the window. And these people's lives, liberty, and property completely taken away from them and interned. And at the end of the war, they were released from the concentration camps and were forgotten about. And we're told, good luck, you're now American citizens again. We're sorry for the inconvenience. Were never compensated, didn't have their property restored to them, their businesses were not restored to them, their reputations were not restored. No one ever apologized and said, hey, we're sorry. These guys didn't do anything wrong. Until 40 years later, when Ronald Reagan finally, they made a cash settlement to the descendants which barely made up for all the property and the business and the reputation being lost. Can you imagine them trying to find work after this? Well, what have you been doing the last 4 years? Well, I'm of Japanese descent, and I was put in a concentration camp because the government decided that I was too dangerous to be a regular American citizen. I was never convicted, never arrested, never been to trial, never before a jury. I was just put in a concentration camp, my home, my business, my car, all my property. Everything was sent to a concentration camp with my wife and my children. Imagine how hard it would have been for them to find a job after that. This is America. I know we like to run around and say, hey, we're the land of the free. We're better than anyone else. It's all fantastic. Everybody's dying to get here, and that's true. But we've also had a history of slavery where we enslaved people of a different race for 400 years or 300 years. Never compensated them for kidnapping them from Africa, dragging them over in slave ships, and a third of the 30% of the slaves on the slave ships were thrown overboard because they died on the way. So hundreds of thousands were murdered. When they got to the U.S., they were sold off like cattle, worked in the fields, worked in chains, beaten daily, murdered for no reason. The only reason they passed a law saying you couldn't murder your property because they had a law saying you couldn't abuse or kill your animals, your cows, your horses. So they had to pass some kind of law to say that, Negroes were at least equal to, or maybe a little bit, higher up the food chain than cattle and chicken and horses. So this is America. The good and the bad and the ugly. This is who we are. Right or wrong. We've done a lot of good in the world. We've also done a lot of bad in the world. I can't think of the last time that Germany bombed Vietnam or dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan or bombed Iraq for having nuclear weapons they didn't have. When was the last time Russia bombed Japan with a nuclear weapon? When was the last time Russia invaded? They just invaded Ukraine. But think about how many countries we've invaded and how many countries Russia invaded. And I'm not saying I'm pro-Russia. I'm not, definitely. And I wouldn't want to live in Russia. I'd rather live in the United States. But the thing you have to understand is that you can love your country but still recognize that we've done wrong. And that we need to make amends for the things we've done wrong. We say we love America, but we built America on the backs of murdering millions of Native Americans that were here before us. Well, we didn't kill them. Most of them, 90% of them died of diseases. But the rest we killed off, and then maybe 5% we put in concentration camps called reservations, where they couldn't leave that reservation upon threat of death. So let's not get on our high horse and talk about how great America is and how we've never done anything wrong and everyone else is wrong. Because when you start pointing that finger out, that one finger you point out, you got to look at your hand. You got 3 more fingers pointing back at yourself. We killed our own president because we disagree with him. We killed Martin Luther King because he was against the war in Vietnam, because it was adversely affecting African Americans being drafted, because most of them couldn't go to college. And if you can go to college, then you got drafted to Vietnam. So let's wake up, folks, and realize the reality of who we are and where we came from. Once we do that, we didn't do it, but goddamn, our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents all did it, and we're a product of that. We're standing on the pedestal on top of the bones of dead African Americans who we enslaved, dead Native Americans who we slaughtered, Mexican Americans, we took their land. Japanese Americans, we took their land, we took their property because we were afraid of them. It was all based on fear. So I don't care how liberal you are, fear will motivate you to do the craziest, most unliberal things. And this is what we're talking about in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Fear motivated liberal, conservative, moderate, normal people into doing the most horrible things, into covering up the most horrible things. 60 years later, why is, anyone who lived back then during Kennedy's assassination is dead now. If they're 20 back then, they're 80 now. They're probably dead. If they were in their 30s, they're 90 now. They're probably dead. So why would we be covering this up 60 years later after all these people are dead? No one's going to jail. They're all dead. The reason is fear about what would happen to these institutions like the CIA, like the DIA, like the Secret Service, like the FBI, whose members participated in the cover-up, and then whose establishment members, once they found out that some of their people participated in the assassination, participated in the cover-up to keep those organizations running and keep them going. Fear of losing those organizations and losing their pensions and their jobs and all these other things kept and is keeping the cover-up going even to this day. All right, and I wanted to end it with this quote by Martin Luther King. It says, this was given at Temple Israel of Hollywood in June 1965. It says, when our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in the universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transfer dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And that's what we're seeking here is justice, folks. If we just have the will and the strength to work toward it. All right, good night.